Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the March 14, 2024 regularly scheduled meeting of the Bismarck Renaissance Zone Authority. See that we have a quorum present. We'll get started. I know that some of the city staff have meetings following this meeting, and so we're going to try and move right along today. One of the items has been pulled from the agenda. That's item 5. We'll get to items 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the meantime, and then the development plan will follow. First item would be to consider the minutes of the February 8th meeting. Any changes, corrections, comments?
I've got a change.
Madam Guy?
So I'd like us to change the words district attorney to attorney general wherever they appear in the minutes there. It says, I think that's on the second page of the minutes. In the
Right, it would be attorney.
seventh paragraph.
It
and the
says North
ninth
Dakota
paragraph.
District Attorney. It should be Attorney General.
Yeah. And
Okay.
So I'm not sure if it appears anywhere else in the minutes, but just anywhere it does,
They'll
let's
find it.
change it.
Okay, good one. Other corrections or changes? Anything further? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes with the correction?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second, oops, excuse me, by Kirsten. There's no further discussion. Everybody that's in favor of that, just say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you. Move on to the regular agenda, and the first item would be the Fleck House project amendment, and I think Isaac is gonna walk us through that, such as it is.
Yes, thank you, Chair Christensen and authority members. So this is an amendment to a project. I'll just put that there. I don't have anything to present for this one in particular, but for future reference in the next ones. Anyway, this is an amendment to a project that the authority considered last July, I believe, July of 2023, and for a partial demolition, partial renovation of the current Budget Inn site. The authority approved that design review. They just a design review at that time. They have since come back and want to demolish the entire Budget Inn site, all of the buildings present there. So that is a substantial enough difference from what they had previously proposed that we are requiring another design review here today. There are a couple of notes that staff want to make sure you are aware, but they are of course outlined in the staff report as well, that there are 2 conditions for approval of this design review. The first one being that any demolition must conform with the various ordinances that are relevant for demolitions, including if the lot is to remain vacant for more than 60 days, it must be landscaped or seeded in some way to minimize impacts on neighboring properties. The applicant at this time does not have updated renderings or visuals to be considered, but they have stated their intent to move forward with development at some point. They just don't have an exact timeline necessarily, but they decided to do the full demolition rather than the partial after further environmental and structural reviews of the site. So then the second condition is that when they come back with updated renderings, they will have to be approved by the design review board again. So all of the findings in the staff report, staff recommend approval of this design review with the 2 stated conditions that demolitions of existing buildings must be consistent with all relevant provisions of the Bismarck City Code of Ordinances, and the applicant must provide new or updated renderings of any proposed development of the site for downtown design review approval prior to issuance of a building permit.
Thank you, Isaac. Questions of staff? Any questions on this item? Questions? Anything from the folks over in technical support? Joe, do you have something?
Just one clarifying, and maybe just Jeff, if you could say the reasons for the demolitions precisely?
There's a representative of the owner present. Would you like to come up? Identify yourself, Jeff?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Ubel with Ubel Design Group, and I'm representing the Lander Group today. The reason for the demolition is as we continue to do investigation on the existing structure, in other words, we were able to dig into it more. We found that there were a couple of different issues. One was an environmental issue, and the second one was a structural issue, which was more significant. The building had been dilapidated for several years, including the roof. And so the roof has been leaking into several aspects of the building. And what we found as we were able to start to dismantle part of the building is that the structure itself had been compromised. the concrete roof and the concrete floor had softened and the rebar had essentially wasted away. And so although we went through the process of investigating what we could do to salvage the building, by the time we got to the point of having anything left, there really wasn't anything. So it just wasn't practical to keep it anymore.
Can't you just replace the rebar? That's what we do with the parking ramps.
Yeah, I know you do that all the time, yeah. Yeah, which is completely inexpensive, right? So,
Other questions of Jeff while we have him? If not, thank you, Jeff.
Thank
What are
you.
your wishes?
I would-
Move to approve the staff recommendations.
And a second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
Sorry, was that Joe or?
Second.
Nancy moved and Joe seconded. To approve with the staff recommendation condition. Okay, hearing and seeing, well, I guess we're not there yet. Oh, yeah, where are there? No further. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Zanker,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Dvorak,
Yes.
Gavrilo,
Yes.
Guy,
Yes,
Munson,
Yes.
Chair Christensen.
Yes, that motion carries. Thanks. We'll move on to item 3 under regular business, the Sanford Bismarck endoscopy expansion. Isaac?
Yes, so Chair Christensen and authority members, our next regular agenda item comes to us from Sanford Bismarck, who are requesting downtown design review approval of an expansion of their existing endoscopy clinic at the corner of at the 715 East Broadway Avenue, so the corner of Main Avenue and 7th Street. It's the whole parcel there, the whole big block and lot there. And the project is sort of two main parts. There is a 17,000 square foot addition to the existing building, as well as a reconstruction of the parking lot, as shown on the screens before you, as well as in the staff report. The addition will have some renderings later, also included in the staff report, and the parking lot itself is a reduction of the parking spaces, but includes perimeter landscaping as well as street trees, which are generally consistent with the streetscape standards, with one note that as you get further east along Main Avenue there, the sidewalk does narrow a little bit, so the applicant noted some difficulty meeting the street trees per linear foot of streetscape there. They do have, of course, other perimeter landscaping around the parking lot, as well as some interior landscaping, and they have expressed an intent to put some type of decorative fence or railing along the southern property boundary of the parking lot as well, which is also generally consistent with streetscape standards. The lighting on this might not be able to tell very clearly, but there is also lighting, pedestrian lighting along Main Avenue that the applicant has addressed. The staff report attachments before you have some other interior renderings or floor plans that generally is not considered for downtown design review. We generally just look at the exterior of buildings, so I have not included that in this presentation here, but they are in your staff report. Materials for the exterior of the building will include various colors of brick, as well as metal paneling and some stone as well along the base of the building. And a few examples of possible designs or materials for the fencing along the southern boundary of Main Avenue there. Staff notes that this is generally consistent with ordinance, as well as the downtown design guidelines and downtown streetscape standards. And based off of the above findings in the staff report, staff recommends approval of the proposed design for 715 East Broadway Avenue as presented in all submitted documents and materials, with the standard condition that any substantive revisions to the approved design must be reconsidered by the Downtown Design Review Committee prior to implementation.
Okay, thanks. Any questions of Isaac? I have a couple, but Nancy?
Isaac, why is the fencing only going on the south side of that parking lot?
In the downtown authority member Guy and authority members at large, the downtown streetscape standards typically call for a fencing of this kind along signature streets as opposed to secondary streets, which is how the streetscape standards classify 7th Street versus Main Avenue. So there is a stronger preference for it along Main Avenue than along 7th Street.
Interesting.
So it's primarily decorative and not, doesn't have a safety aspect or anything to it?
Correct.
questions, Kristen?
But, and maybe this is more for discussion, but wouldn't you say Seventh and Main Street's a pretty,
Both seem like arterials, don't
Yeah.
they?
especially that intersection?
Is that a condition we can attach if we so choose to?
To clarify, a condition of having said
Continue the
railing
fencing along Seventh, right.
along Seventh as well?
Or can we do it?
If that is your prerogative, that you would be able to make that condition.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, David?
Yeah, my question relates to the entrance to the building. Is there a main entrance on this part of the building, or is the main entrance still along
Broadway?
Broadway?
If,
So the door that's at the corner there that has some of the architectural features associated with it, what is the use of that door?
Staff use for the parking lot?
So any customers would not use that door, but that door would be used by staff. And is that the use of the likely users of the parking lot as well? I do have some design comments, but those are my questions, I guess. So.
Okay. Eric, anything at this point?
Sorry, could I have a name of the gentleman answering?
Oh, yeah. Please identify yourself.
Eric Melmer, Sanford Health.
Okay.
Melmer.
Okay. Other questions at the table? You mentioned lighting and we don't have any examples of that. Is it consistent with the lighting that's downtown?
the applicants
design.
did request the specifications of lighting, that it would be consistent with other areas in the downtown, and staff did provide that to them.
Okay.
The location is highlighted here. I believe the coloring is perhaps a little easier to see in the staff report attachment, or perhaps not. But some of those details could also be determined in the site plan review process.
And then how many parking spaces will be lost?
I believe it went from 96 down to 68. Let me double check that to confirm. Yes, 96 down to 68 by
So
staff's
I've
count.
been asked, as serving on the parking authority, but for those 2 or 3 people watching at home, the site is within the parking district downtown, correct?
I would have to double check that to confirm.
Daniel, do you know? I'm sure it is. I think it is. I should know that.
30-member Christensen, 30 members. Well, so now all DC, DF, and HM district is exempt from parking, so that's
Okay.
correct. No parking is required.
That was my question. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay. Other questions? Joe?
And this might be for staff. So like, we've gotten the questions a few times about Sanford using the Renaissance zone. They're not the owner of the building. The LLC would be the owner of the building. They would be seeing the benefit. They are not exempt from taxation to begin with, correct?
I would invite a representative from Sanford to answer that question.
That's the whole reason.
Who owns the property? That's what I thought. So, it's not owned by a separate LLC, a for-profit entity. Okay. Okay. Does that answer your question, Joe?
Yep.
Okay. All right, anything else for the, go to the order, what are your wishes? Are you pretty much ready to get going? I assume with the weather and everything being great? So.
Jim, I do have.
Oh, I'm sorry. David, go ahead.
Yeah, so, just a few things to just bring to your attention for consideration on this. Generally, in downtown environments, you try to avoid putting a parking lot between the public right-of-way and certainly the main building entrance. In this case, the main entrance is on the other side of the building, and in this case, the design guidelines, as they're written, do not require the building to be at the public right of way. The way it's written in the guidelines is that the building should align with adjacent buildings. So in that sense, this seems to fit with those guidelines. But it does, from a best practice perspective, it really kind of flies in the face of a downtown environment to have the parking lot between Main Street and the building. And so I just wanted to suggest maybe some considerations towards that end, and at least the potential to provide pedestrian access from the sidewalk to what appears to be the main entrance of the building, at least, so that you're not, that's a little bit more obvious and direct than what is currently on the site plan, much in the same way the parking lot was designed for the depot building. I don't know if you recall some of the design features of that parking lot, but there was some deliberate consideration for how a pedestrian would arrive to the front door of that building, and you might consider that perspective on this design as well.
Would the applicants care to address those questions or concerns? I mean, we all understand there's a parking lot between the sidewalk and the building now, and we're actually making that area smaller by doing this, but.
Correct, but the way that this addition is going to go, there's going to be surgical procedure with this stuff, that we have to share services with the existing building. So having a separate building is really
Right, understand.
possible. There's many systems, medical gases, those things have to be shared with the existing building we have.
What about the access to the corner entrance by the patients? Does that make any sense, or?
We want to discourage that. We don't want the patients coming to that corner. Could you speak into the microphone? You can. The record.
Thanks.
So the way that we're planning on using this building is we're gonna gate the south side, the southeast parking lot approach there. And we may potentially gate the northwest approach as well. Not approach, but into the new parking lot. So all patients will be directed to the main entrance that we're currently using. The throughput of the building is from north to south, and then back out where the patient pickup currently is.
If I could maybe
Sure.
explain it a little bit right here. So the patients are going to enter from this parking lot, and we'll have monument sign and other signs up here directing them to this patient entrance up here. And so the flow will be from this direction through the services, and then this is the patient pickup here. And so they'll be able to go out here. And so we're really discouraging the patients from utilizing this and not entering from there.
So that'll actually be gated for employee cards to get in and out. That makes sense.
That's the plan right now.
So employees who are arriving on foot can only go through that gate into the parking lot? They can't get into the parking lot from another side of the parking lot? I think that's the question.
Well, we should be able to enter, they'll be able to enter here if they want, they'll be able to enter here if they want.
The gates are for the card,
Yeah.
just an arm, right?
Yeah, it's just a control bar.
Okay,
And there's a sidewalk on this is the sidewalk on the whole south side of the building.
Okay,
And this one we maintain as well.
okay. What about the concept of extending the fence, at least around the corner, partially up to, say, the line of the new building where it meets the old building? Is that
On Seventh Street?
Yeah.
To be completely honest, we were proposing and advocating to not have a fence due to snow removal, debris, and things like that. If it didn't provide a security type feature, we didn't really want a fence. So if we have to meet requirements, we will put a fence there, but ultimately, we don't even want a fence.
So absent a fence, you're just gonna have basic landscaping elements, rocks and shrubs and bushes and flowers and,
Correct.
right?
Commissioner, or Chair Christensen, there's an elevation change there between the sidewalk.
There is.
Isn't there? I mean, so there would be and you're not gonna, without having the full civil plan, you're not cutting that down to the sidewalk level, correct? Are you gonna leave it elevated a little bit, or?
No, there's a whole new civil plan for this.
For that.
to Regrade that whole, there's a
Correct.
whole redo there.
So are you gonna cut that then to make it the same level as the sidewalk?
Is Jamie on this call? We had our architects and our civil engineer that we're gonna
Defer that.
WebEx.
Chime in?
Yeah,
They were provided the link, but they do not appear to be on the call.
okay.
We have submitted those civil engineering documents to the city for those changes. So this is gonna.
Works, right? They take care of that, we take care of this.
So right now where it currently is, where there's that huge, right there, that's all being cut back because the city asked us to
Traffic.
create more of a right of way there because it juts out. So
Sight
we're
line.
setting that back. And then,
Addressing the traffic
I
concerns,
know with
vision.
the water flow and all that stuff, there's actually some storm drain work that's gonna be done too, so. I wish my engineer was on this call so he could answer it a little bit more clearly, but I anticipate that not having as much of an elevation change.
Other questions? Well, we have the gentleman at the podium, anything?
So I'm kind of thinking the fence requirement on the south side, if it's for no other reason than ornamentation, is kind of goofy. I mean, it seems to me unnecessary.
If,
Commissioner, I would agree with that because, I mean, it's like putting up a one wall. I mean, why would you do that if it's not aesthetically gonna go back to the north, or if they're not able to use it for security purposes? It does seem to be, unnecessary. I mean, and on the bright side of this is a very good solution. That corner has been,
Oh, yeah.
ever since they took the Bank of North Dakota down, it's kind of been an eyesore, and they're coming here to clean it up, so I applaud them for that.
Yes, go ahead.
We also anticipate damage to any sort of fence in that area due to snow removal, heavy winters, stuff like that. So that's a big concern of ours of putting something up and then potentially damaging it with snow removal equipment as well.
So to be clear, is the fence in or out of the plan that we're being asked to approve on the south side?
Chair Christensen and authority members, I will add one clarification before I answer that question, and I conveyed this to their engineer consultants as well. The design guidelines and streetscape standards are not necessarily requirements in the same way that ordinance is, but they do try outline a series of preferences to try maintain consistency amongst projects, such as the decorative fence or railing would help provide a similar street edge feeling as if there was a building built to the property line there. To call it a requirement is perhaps not an accurate framing. I was under the impression that this included that, but again, not necessarily a strict requirement.
Okay,
The only comment that I would make, I would rather see it consistent between the two faces than inconsistent. So either it's all fence or it's no fence. It would be my suggestion.
I think we all.
Either solution seems apparently.
And personally, I feel that the fence adds some aesthetics to the site,
Yeah, I might defer to our design.
but only if you wrap the corner with it, so. But I don't know if we can impose that condition on our approval, so.
Well,
We
the
can-
property next to it on the east probably doesn't have anything like that along the street edge.
No,
So,
but they're not before us.
no, they aren't, but I'm just saying, you were talking about consistency, and there's nothing over there that we need to be consistent with.
And there's no other fence like this except for when you get to Fifth and Main, right?
The
And they
depot,
did
the
that
depot
for
site.
security purposes.
Well, and then the new depot
The new
site
depot
will be similar.
It's not like.
Authority members, if I may add, there is at least one other example on the south side of Maine, across from the India clay oven, that general area. There is one there as well.
Or the elbow
The designs can vary, of course, but again, not necessarily a requirement, strictly speaking.
Okay. So we can express our preference, but we can't impose it, I guess, so. Other questions or comments? Wishes? Action?
Move to approve with the staff recommendations.
Is there a second?
Without fence?
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, without fence.
Second. Glad we strong-armed you into that thing.
No, I thought that the consensus after Isaac's statements was that we can't make them put the fence there, so, anyway, so,
Essentially, that's correct. Right?
without, yeah, I move to approve of staff recommendations without any request for a fence there on the
Without any
south side.
Requirement or request? We can always ask.
Requirement.
Seconded by,
I'd still second that.
seconded by Commissioner Zanker. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, please, Sandra.
Poor
Commissioner
Sandra.
Fink,
Yes.
Dvorak,
Yes.
Gavrilo,
Yes.
Guy,
Yes,
Munson,
Yes.
Zenker,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes, that motion carries. Item 4 on the agenda. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your continued investment in downtown Bismarck. We appreciate it. Arco gas station repair. Isaac is going to bring us up to speed on that.
Okay. Chair Christensen, authority members, our final regular agenda item is a downtown design review approval request from Parkland USA Corporation at 406 North 6th Street. This is a little more unique one in the sense that this, perhaps some who work or have been around this particular gas station are aware that this gas station was hit by a car recently. And so this request is to repair some damage to the gas station as shown on the screen before you, as well as an attachment to your staff report. The reason it is coming before design review is strictly because when discussed, it is of course in the downtown zoning district, and when discussed how they would handle the repair to the exterior structure, if they were going to replace the exterior with the pre-existing white brick facade, much like the rest of the building, we would not require downtown design review because it would not be considered an alteration to the exterior facade. The applicant did express a desire to use the proposed Nichiha architectural block in gray as shown on the screen and staff report. The owner had expressed an intent to, at some point in the future, redo and alter the entire exterior of the gas station, as they are trying to do that with some various gas stations they own around town. And they believed it was prudent, or at least made more sense, to not repair the damage to the old brick, knowing that perhaps in a year or 2 years from now they would then take that away, much with all the rest of the brick, and then put on the new siding. So they thought it made the most sense to put in the new siding in this particular spot, but not the rest of the building. And because that is considered an alteration, that is why it is before you today for downtown design review. Staff, upon reviewing ordinances and design guidelines, find that it is generally consistent with these in terms of the color and materials being proposed. And based on the above findings, staff recommends approval of the proposed design for 406 North 6th Street as presented in all submitted documents and materials, with the regular condition that any substantive revisions to the approved design must be reconsidered by Downtown Design Review Committee prior to implementation.
Thank you. Any questions of staff on this particular item? Any architectural comments or questions? No? Or yes, Eric? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the existing material is a brick, you said?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, architecturally, I think, considering how that new Nichiha panel interfaces with the brick at that outside corner is kind of important. If it's just a material change at an outside corner, it's gonna look a little odd. So there's maybe ways to address that. Perhaps they could wrap it around the corner a little bit to create a change of plane. But I guess it'll look a little odd until they finish wrapping the whole building with the new material. That sounds like is what they're planning to do, so.
Okay, good. Kristen?
I was gonna say, are they going to wrap it up now, or are they gonna do it like 6 months or a year from now? Do we have a timeline when they're gonna finish that out?
So Authority Member Dvorak and Authority Members at Large, they have not specified an exact timeline of when they anticipate the alteration to the rest of the building. They weren't necessarily planning on doing this portion of the building now, but because it was damaged, they thought it would make more sense to put in the new material on this section rather than go to the old material and then take that away and put in the new material when they decided they were ready to do the whole building, if that makes
I
sense.
think they'd want to get it going.
Yeah.
Get the plywood down.
Well, yeah, but I think it's gonna look a little funny, and how long are they gonna have this half-done building it look like, but.
Other questions? Does the mansard stay as is then? In the top photo? Where the lettering is and the,
Yeah, Chair Christensen and authority members, no proposed changes
Yeah,
have
that area.
been
Okay.
relevant to the mansard and the,
Okay.
all
Other
of that.
questions? Staff recommends approval, I'm sorry.
I would move approval with staff
Is there a
recommendations.
second?
Second.
Further discussion?
I,
Joe?
to address our consultant's concerns about the wrapping, I think is worthwhile, without a time frame of knowing when this rest of the building will be addressed. I think it's worthwhile to at least have our consultants work with them to find some accommodation around wrapping that around a corner, ensuring that that corner is not just a harsh change. If this lasts any number of years, it'll be an eyesore.
Do you want to include that in your motion, your
Yes.
original motion? And the seconder, who seconded it?
Yep. Yeah, I agree to that.
Okay.
Can, authority members, can we get a clarification as to what exactly the wording of this?
Yeah, to find, I mean, the applicant will consult with our technical advisors to find an accommodable solution to the corner.
Technical advisors and staff.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is that clear as mud, Sandra? Sure. Good. No further discussion, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dvorak,
Yes.
Gavrilo,
Yes.
Guy,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Zenker,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Chair Christensen.
Yes, that motion carries. So there being no further business. I turned the mic off. We'll move on to other business, which includes review of Renaissance Zone Development Plan bylaws and ordinance. And we'll start with Daniel with the development plan.
Good evening, Chair Christensen, authority members. So last month, all of you reviewed an outline of changes that need to be made to your, I guess I'll say, authoritative documents for the Renaissance Zone Authority. We received some feedback from that meeting, and now we have some language that has been proposed to you and submitted in the packet from last week. What I'll do, I'll maybe just describe the process for these, and then I won't go through line by line like we did last time, but I'll maybe highlight some of the content that you might want to pay attention to. So all three of these documents, the Renaissance Zone Development Plan, the city ordinance, in particular, Title VII, and the bylaws all have a different procedure. So we'll probably want to make sure they go hand in hand. However, we'll follow a different pathway. The development plan will have a public hearing with you, and then once you are able to approve this, it will go to the city commission, and then from there, the development plan itself establishes that process. The bylaws you can change at will. You could do that today if you wanted to, although we may recommend waiting and doing them together. You have full authority over the bylaws yourself. The city ordinance, of course, city commission makes that decision. You do not need to hold a public hearing for that. We're bringing it to you for your guidance and your recommendation, and then we could present that to the city commission for 2 readings, and then potentially their final approval. So that's how they would all move forward. So today, this is your first look at the language. I know we already have some revisions suggested by Authority Member Fink, who's provided them to me in advance, and so I have those changes. If there are any other changes, you could either communicate those today or get them to me in some other way. And once you are ready and you feel like it's at a position where you can move forward, we can call the public hearing with this body. So that's the process for these. Maybe I'll stop if there's any questions related to the process.
Questions about the process? Continue, please.
Okay. So with the development plan, I think the sections you may want to note more clearly, it's if you turn to page 27 through 29 of the new development plan, this is a new section related to the project benefits. And this section is intended to comply with the request of the Burley County and the letter of intent issued by the City Commission, along with some discussion that occurred at this body last meeting. So this outlines the income tax exemption and the property tax exemption and how that property tax exemption in particular would be calculated. And so basically, the baseline would be determined at the time of application. However, there is some language in here that gives you the ability to alter that based on demolitions that may occur with the project. Now, there is also some language in here related to the historic character. That was an issue that came up during the last meeting, and I believe there's maybe some hesitancy to be incentivizing a demolition of an historic building. So there's some language in here that allows you to essentially not count the demolition as part of as adjusting the baseline if they are demolishing an historic building as defined in the plan. So it gives the discretion to this body and of course also the City Commission, which you are making recommendations to. Now, but on average, on the average project, it would be the assessed value at the time of application that would be used. And then the improved value would be determined at the time of improvement. We don't know exactly what that will be. The assessing department determines that when they come back in after the project is completed. However, staff would give an estimate to you and then to carry on to the City Commission. So you do have some idea of what that increment value will be, and in turn, what the exemption value would be. So that's how the baseline and the increment would be determined. And then we've left two options for you to consider for the determination of the actual exemption. Option one follows to the letter, the way the letter of intent was written and requested by Burley County, which is simply only the increment would be exempted, the baseline would not. Option two allows each taxing entity to vary the proportion of the baseline of the taxation. And of course, we don't know what those proportions would be. We know that Burley County's would be 0. That is their request. The others we don't. And so I should note the state of North Dakota is also a beneficiary of this property tax exemption too. So that's a question maybe to deal with that as well. So those are the two options before you, and perhaps I'll stop at that one before getting on to another.
I think that's a good stopping off point of discussion.
I've got a couple items. On the demolition, is there a reason that you're only looking at this 3-year look back for historic? I would prefer it to apply to all properties.
So Authority Member Gavello, it could apply to all, certainly. We were taking cues from, I guess, the hesitancy to be incentivizing demolition of historic buildings, but I suppose if they were to demolish a non-historic building, that could be exempted from the baseline in order to allow that to be exempted. For example, the budget inn maybe could be a good example. If they were to demolish that, they would essentially be starting from 0 on their assessment.
Oh, maybe I'm understanding the language backwards then, because I thought that this was saying that if it's been demolished in the last 3 years, then the demolition wouldn't be excluded from the exemption.
Authority Member Gavrilo, so the intention at least, I should say, is that would apply only if you were deeming this an historic building in order to refrain from incentivizing that. But a non-historic building would be valued at the time of the demolition.
Prior to the demolition.
Oh, after the demolition.
But doesn't that incentivize the demolition?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so if we want to avoid that, then shouldn't we look at if there's been a demolition, and maybe the exemption should be, if the structure was destroyed by fire, then, the demolition really isn't demolition. But, I think that it is an issue because you don't want, there to be an incentive in the rules for perfectly good buildings to be knocked down just to start over. So is there, I mean, if there would be interest at the table to word this in such a way that the demolition does not count if it's been done in the last 3 years. So you can't knock it down and then come back a month later and ask for an exemption based on the new value.
If that's the wishes of authority, I'll write it that way.
Chair, if I can.
Please.
And if we go back to the budget in conversation, its current market value, according to the tax records, is $1,353,000. So if they tear it down, what's the value in this process?
The
Zero?
improvements?
Or
No, it'd be the land value
be
only.
the land value only,
Right.
because it's
But
tore
land
down.
value's not exempt in FR anyway.
So that's the biggest concern Berta County's gonna have, is that value should baseline at $1,300,000,
Mm-hmm.
not at zero.
Yeah.
But in this particular instance, which we just heard earlier, we can't force them to keep a building that is shot.
Correct. I think the right
And that's
choice
where
is
the
to tear it
value is
down.
coming from, the improvements.
Right.
So if the improvements are gone, it seems common sense that we're gonna deal with the land value, to me.
I think that the county might have a problem with the spirit of that, because then we are we are putting ourselves in the position of determining whether there's value there, when, if there's no value there, why is it being assessed at $1 million?
Correct.
So, are we assessing properties that are worthless and charging people taxes for them? That's a separate issue.
Point.
But, and maybe there needs to be some sort of process in there, but if they haven't gotten a previous abatement to declare that the property is essentially worthless before they demo it, then then the baseline should remain where it is prior to demo. Is there a way to do that elegantly that would allow for, if they have come in for an abatement to declare that the property is worthless prior to demolition, then maybe that is the exemption. But if they have not sought for the tax situation to change, then they themselves have not acknowledged that it's worthless prior to the demolition.
In this particular instance, I think they just recently discovered some of the
Yeah.
defects. But to use your prior example, if there's a fire and it's almost an entirely destroyed building, you still hold them
No,
responsible?
no,
Well, what's the difference between fire damage and water damage? If it's an unusable, architecturally determined and engineering determined to not be.
Order of operations, I think, would be the best answer to that. And if the issue is to address the county's situation of they're losing revenue due to the exemption, then the loss of revenue is not due to the exemption, it's due to the demo. And then if we have a policy in here that incentivizes the demo to get the exemption, then it's kind of a, circular situation. But I think that there's got to be a better solution to remedy that, to eliminate the incentive without punishing the owner.
But I would agree with Chair Christensen's comment. If it's damage due to fire or damage due to water, that value is gone. My county commissioner are gonna look at this tax statement and say, the value is $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
The tax due is $24,000. So at what point does the building owner, now that they found the issues, have this reassessed?
Right.
At what point does common sense enter the discussion is what I want to know.
Um,
One question for Mr. Munson. Of that 24,000, how much of that goes to Burley County?
$2,787.
That's all I got.
No, that's all I got.
We're having a conversation over $2,000.
I understand.
It's a policy and.
I'm here representing,
I understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. But that's one property. There might be another situation that has higher numbers involved in the future, so that's why you have policies.
30 members, if I may, the one factor we have considered is we want the applicants to come to us as soon as possible in their decision-making process in order to make the program as effective as possible. So they know they're getting this and then they decide to do the project. There could be a potential, if we require the demolition to occur first before they apply for their Renaissance zone, they may end up moving forward and then coming to us after the demolition has already been done, and then now their property is worthless, and then they can get their Renaissance zone exemption from zero. So it could incentivize people to wait, hold on to a property longer, and then move forward.
Yeah, I mean, either way, you're gonna lose tax revenue, because it's a game to play, and if we put a 3-year time frame on demolishing a building to get a 0% tax exemption, that's what they're going to do. At least someone is going to make that decision, eventually.
Can there not be a provision for a building that is damaged beyond repair, reasonably repairable?
That makes the most sense.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't think we're
Fire,
gonna have
water,
a
whatever it is.
rash of projects rushing in and say, we wanna tear down our building
No.
so that we bring the taxable value down to zero or to the land value only.
But I guess I would, if I might, Chair,
Yeah.
I would find it difficult as a policy to justify that it must be due to fire or water or some, if they want to do it, it's their building.
But I think what we're talking about is buildings that are beyond repair. At least that's.
Or it makes financial sense to knock it down versus it's not beyond repair. But financially, for me and the way a project comes together, I don't want to use those materials in my project, and
Right.
it makes more sense for me to raise this site and start new. But it wasn't damaged beyond repair now.
As long as it's not historical,
That's a separate.
that's a separate issue.
Yeah, it would, I mean, for me personally, historic would be a problem to begin with.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, we also need to get into the definition of historic, because all of downtown Bismarck is a historic district. So,
Yeah, he defines historic.
It is defined, yeah, anything contributing to.
He just forgot to
the-
capitalize a few terms.
we're individually listed
Right,
in the National Register.
right.
So,
So do we think that there is a problem with the incentive issue of demo or not? Because, I mean, I've heard that from multiple people, that there might be an incentive to demo when it wouldn't necessarily be the best route. So either there is a incentive to address or there's not.
For my chair.
Yeah, go
I guess
ahead.
my view on it would be that if we put a look-back period on demolition, there will be an incentive to demo. There's no doubt in my mind that that's going to happen. They're still business people, and they're still gonna have to make a financial decision on whether it makes sense to demolish versus get a lower tax exemption. But I'd like for the best possible product left over at the end of it, then I guess I'm less worried about it.
how much discretion does this body have, project by project?
30, member
If
Christensen,
they come to us and say, we want to demolish it, we have, 3 years have passed, whatever.
I'd say as much as is written in here and all the taxing entities are willing to accept. From a state level, I think you have
If we add the
discretion.
words, at the discretion of the authority,
Mr. Chair. One of the suggestions I made to Daniel was to fully remove the 3-year requirement and simply say, if it's, I'm gonna get the wording probably a little bit incorrectly, but if it's of consequence as per the authority. Like, if we think that demolition is of consequence, or this thing was knocked down 3 years ago and it's been sold twice, and it's gonna be, is that of consequence? Or it's knocked down a year ago and now we have someone that wants to move forward with it. Was that of consequence? Or was it the same owner that was looking at getting a tax exemption and wanted to wait 3 years? That's of consequence to me. But it technically meets the 3-year requirement, so now it doesn't matter. If we get rid of the 3-year and we can look
At
at these
the
on a case-by-case
discretion of the
basis,
authority.
like, it is of the discretion of the authority of, if that is of consequence, then we can worry about it. The other language that I pushed for on this would be that it is, it's not mandatory. If you want to knock down a historic building, we have the option of doing this, of maintaining that value. But you're not forced to take that demolition into consideration and when it comes to the value. So it gives more authority to this authority in making those decisions on a case-by-case basis. I think quantifying it as a number of years or a specific period of time would be the wrong route to go, simply because they will play that game.
Yeah,
Someone will.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So we would instruct staff to craft some language that makes it clear that it is ultimately at the discretion of this authority. Whether you use consequential or some other synonym or.
As far as Dustin's concerned on if it's only historic buildings or not, if that makes or breaks the difference between getting approval from the other taxing districts we need to worry about, then it's of concern to me. But if it is giving us the authority or the ability to care about non-historic is just fine with me, one way or the other.
I think that the only time that that comes in play is if it is outside of the historic district and is something else. And this was just something that was brought up.
Yep.
But several people said it even at the county meeting. And, you know, it made sense that it might be an issue. So that was my contention. And maybe it's a dollar threshold or something that rather than 3 years, if it impacts, you know, the county reduces it by a certain level, then maybe it has to meet a certain higher scrutiny at the discretion.
Right.
Okay,
I think that at discretion of the authority makes the most sense.
gives us broad control.
Yep.
Thank you. Understood.
And hopefully, there's still some common sense out there. A project like the one we saw earlier.
Yeah.
Hopefully, even the ones that don't have any common sense can have some common sense when it comes to a building that's gotta be torn down.
And Chair Christensen, I mean, that could be one of the things that we require too, right? If they're bringing something in saying, hey, we need to demolish this. I mean, Mr. Ubel came up and gave his
Exactly why I asked.
his professional opinion, and they've done the R&D on it, and they can provide that report too. It says, hey, it's beyond structural, you know, at that time. So we as a board can make that decision with that authority.
Good point.
Have to prove it.
Yeah. All right, well, moving right along.
Yep, thank you. So one other thing I wanted to highlight on page 30, related to the constitution of this board. Now, the way the board is made up is actually in the development plan. The ordinance just establishes the authority to create a board, but actually how it's constituted is in here. We've discussed a lot of this, and I think there's already been a consensus on who would be invited to be members of this board. The only thing added here is that in any case, the county, school board, or park board choose not to appoint a member, they would have the option to do that. We don't know that the school board and park board would like to have a member. The city commission would appoint in their stead an at-large for 3 years member, and in each 3 years, they'd have the option to exercise their ability to have a board member on this authority. So that's the only thing we added to make sure we're covering that contingency. But other than that, I think it's.
Daniel, can I interject there, please? So, board and Daniel, so with that, when you pick out the Burley County Commission, Public Schools and stuff like that, and then you say a 3-year term, my only concern there is that typically, on those election cycles, that's when portfolios get kind of dispersed amongst those entities. So if you have somebody in there that has that 3-year term, and then that board has whatever person wants to do something and be part of the RZ board, then how do we handle that?
So, yeah, that's a good point, Commissioner Zenker, board. So the intent here is, and I can try to make sure it's clear if it's not, is that 3-year term only applies to the 5 at-large members, that the appointees of the different commissions would be there for life, I suppose, for the remainder of their term with that commission, or at the wishes of that commission.
Yeah.
That portfolio holder.
Correct.
Okay,
Or whomever.
good.
So are you gonna, Daniel, are you gonna clear that up in here?
I
Because obviously I read it and was confused, but I'm not the smartest person at the table, so.
Do we just wanna?
We'll do that.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I have one very quick question on this. When it comes to quorum, can we do that can we fix it in the bylaws so that it's present rather than appointed, or to make sure that doesn't become a problem if you have more members just not showing up?
Well, a quorum of those present, I mean, so 3 people show out of 15 or whatever. What is the number we're gonna end up potentially?
It would be 9.
9?
Whoever is there.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna
Yeah.
have to have 5.
Okay.
Right.
I-
City attorney left, but I'm pretty sure.
I could see an issue there, yeah.
If we had 35 members, it'd be different.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments on that section?
The only, Dan, I know you have these already, but just for the other board, the other clarification I made on this one was that it would, to not force the city commission's hand to have to appoint someone should one of the boards not want to have someone on there. I've kind of gone back and forth about this a couple of times, but the fact that the mayor simply doesn't reserve a position for someone that the boards put forward at an at-large appointment just seems backwards to me on why we wouldn't just say, we're gonna keep the board membership and if he appoints someone from the board, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. They're still gonna recommend who goes there, and they're gonna be able to resign their position anytime they need to. But I understand the approach.
Yeah, thank you, Authority Member Fink. I've noted that, and obviously they can decide what they would like to do anyway, so I think it's better to reflect that.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Moving right along, Danielle?
Okay, the only other major change would be on page 34, we've added in an amendment section to the development plan, which actually wasn't in there at all before. It was just done by public hearing, but that wasn't really ever specified anywhere. So this, I believe this reflects pretty much the discussion that we had last month without really any controversy, I believe. Just to maybe outline the way it would work, as soon as this body recommends approval in a public hearing of any amendment to development plan, that includes boundary adjustments, textual amendments, anything, it goes to the city commission first. The way this works is the city commission, if they say no, it stops there. If they approve the amendment, then it does go to the other 3 taxing entities, county, schools, park board. And then among those 3, it would need a majority support. So any 2 out of 3 would need to support it by votes of their own boards for it to be then submitted to the state. And then the state would be the one to make the final decision. That's how this is written. We hadn't had that hashed out exactly at last meeting, but that's our proposal. We can make any changes as you wish.
Comments on that item?
I can see a problem there.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I guess the only comment, the comment I'll start off making would be, we need the county and the school board to approve the plan. If either of those 2 don't approve the plan on a renewal basis, we're done. Parks doesn't get a say. They get a say because the city says they want to have a say from parks. I don't think it's worthwhile. I think you walk a fine line if parks can override something the county and or the school board doesn't want to do. And I would be fearful of that, and I think we need to keep the focus on making sure that the county and the schools are satisfied with the plan. If we want to continue to go to the park board, great. But really, as an authority member, I only care about 2 of those.
But hypothetically, what if the Parks Board voted not to support the renewal?
Doesn't matter to the state.
True, but,
Concurrence of the county and schools with input from the parks.
yeah.
I think that's the only way to fix that problem.
I'm fine with that. We've always included them.
We
obviously,
have,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they don't have a veto.
But they've never said no either.
Correct.
Why do you keep looking at me that way?
Okay. So, Is Daniel clear on how we want that?
I am clear, I can make the changes.
Okay. Other comments, questions? We are up against the 5 o'clock hour, the witching hour, but we've got more to cover. And I know Daniel has to
There
leave
is-
shortly. So,
So there is one more, I'd like to go back and just look at those. Daniel mentioned doing option 1, option 2.
yeah, I was afraid
And,
of that.
and my only comment at this point is that I would suggest option 2, allowing the city to make its own decision on making its own program as effective as possible. And we have schools and park board and the state of North Dakota, which really doesn't get a say, but, that agree 100% of the baseline should be, exempted, with the county saying, no, it shouldn't be. So allowing the program to be as effective as possible is probably in the best interest for the program the city runs. So that's why I'd encourage us to go that route with 100% attributed to all of them except the county.
From a practical
is-
standpoint, Daniel, is that workable?
So I've had a conversation with Al Vietmeyer, who would be the one implementing this at the Burley County. And this is the Burley County, so just to be clear, the city assesses the properties and assigns the valuation, the county collects the taxes. So the proportionality would be the responsibility of the county to collect at that proportion. My understanding is that would not be easy to do. They would have to create separate taxing districts just for the Renaissance Zone program to allocate them at a proportional basis. We may have had some different conversations, so I think we'll need to clarify that with Al Vietmeyer. However, my understanding is that this would be a challenge for Burley County to implement in a practical manner.
And when I spoke with him, he didn't give any sort of indication that it would be a problem at all. So like that's, I encourage Daniel, let's have that conversation again and just make sure we're clear what we're intending.
And I think that treating all the political subdivisions equally would be the path of least resistance, so.
So we either invite Mr. Vietmeyer to our next meeting and continue this, or decide to kill that snake right now.
So you're saying we should go with option 1?
No.
He's saying
No.
option 2.
And my rationale is option 1 is easier. There's no doubt about that. But it makes the program, I think, per the letter someone drafted for this, about 21% less effective. And it's the city's project. Like the amount of I forget how the wording of the letter was, but I think it's 23. Yeah, by the way. Let's go with whatever the letter says.
Sure, 30 member, I just maybe reference that. I did include that in the packet. I haven't highlighted it for you, but that was a request of me. So over the last 10 years, if you look at all the projects, on average, 23% of a project would be the baseline and the remainder would be the incremental value. So third member, I think, is correct. If we were to move to this direction, it would make the program 23% less effective overall.
Move in which direction? Option 1?
Option 1.
Or 100%?
Well, that's not how percentages work, but I understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think we need more information on option 2
We'll continue the discussion. on
before
that.
we
That's
make a
fine.
decision.
Okay. Thank you. We're probably not going to get this all done today. Rome wasn't built in a day, as Bruce used to say, yes.
I have one quick thing to point out. If you go to page 23 of the plan, the section III, the lowercase I, we talk about current true and full valuation, and then down below in that table, it's percent of the assessed value. I think we're talking about the same thing, but then back in the definitions, we define it with current taxable value. I mean, that's the term that we define in the definition, so we should call it current taxable value all the way through, or change the word that we're defining in the definitions, one or
Good
the
point.
other.
Thank you, Authority Member Guy. That may be something Authority Member Finn caught already, but
Okay.
I'll make sure of that.
Okay. That's all I had.
Thank
I
you.
have a bunch of typos that I can just
Give to
email to Daniel. We don't
Please
have
do.
to
Yeah, that's good.
go through one by one.
Please. And that stands for everyone. If you wish to get something to me, I'll make sure that it gets included.
I've never known Daniel to make a typo, but it must have been his staff. Again, I know you have to be elsewhere, I'm supposed to be elsewhere, and probably others are too, so can we move the bylaws discussion to the next meeting agenda as well? And the ordinance as well? Is everybody okay with that? Yes. Okay. Kate, do you have?
Two more places to be too.
Okay. Do they involve golf, either one of them?
One involves baseball
and one So, no report from the, no report from the downtowners today. Duly noted. Item 8 on the ejection, wow. The election, yes, item 8 on the agenda is election of officers. Do we do this annually, Daniel, or every other, honestly don't remember. I thought we just did it too, but.
This
we
is done
apparently-
annually. It was on the agenda last month, but we
Oh.
never actually did it, so.
We ran out of
yeah.
time. Okay. Who are the current officers? I know who the chair is. Who's the vice chair?
Chair
Joe?
Christensen, Vice Chair Fink.
And that's it for officers. We have-
I'll make a motion to leave the current officers in place.
Second.
Oh, boy. Sounds like a railroad job to me. Joe, you get to continue doing all the work.
Should we be asking if they're willing?
No.
That's not how this works.
That's not how railroad works.
It's called certition.
Are there any further nominations? We'll close the nominations and call the roll. Please.
Commissioner Gavrilo,
Yes.
Guy,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Zenker,
Yes.
Fink,
Yes.
Dvorak,
Yes.
Chair
I
Christensen.
was gonna vote no if you voted no.
We're only two,
Somebody should vote no.
Is that a yes, Chair Christensen?
That's a yes. If there's no further business, and hearing and seeing none, and if there's no objection, we stand adjourned until, what's the date on the next one here? April 11th. Thanks, everybody, for your participation and all your comments and help on this